The Renaissance, Sir Francis Bacon, Part 11, Idols of the Marketplace, Professor Michael Botwin, Department of Psychology, California State University, Fresno. Our second of Francis Bacon's idols are the idols of the marketplace, and these are the tendencies to make intellectual errors due to the act of human communication. And if you look around our world nowadays, the lack of good communication, the way people attempt to distort communication, I think that this idol is even more important today than it was in Bacon's time. So let's look at this notion. And what Bacon says is that biases of the marketplace are due to the tendency to bias things based on the meanings assigned to words. And this is very important because individuals use words differently. Individuals may communicate words in ways that others don't understand. So let's look at this one in detail. First of all, Bacon was an avowed anti-nominalist. If you remember, we talked about nominalism before, and nominalism is the notion of naming something. And just because you name something doesn't give the name itself any inherent meaning, which is something that Bacon would really, after looking at this in detail, be in favor of. You need to make sure that you're not distorting what you're talking about because of the words you're using. And Bacon says that language itself introduces those imperfections that we have as humans. What are some of the problems with words? Well, Bacon believed that words are hindrances to understanding things. For an author like Bacon, and a very good author, it's kind of an interesting premise, isn't it? People can imagine things that don't exist, for example. And we talked about this with the Greeks, but how precise can language be if you can discuss things that in no way exist? With the possible exception of one of my favorite characters, Master Yoda. In all honesty, yes, I know Yoda doesn't exist. Yoda is a character in a movie. Started as a puppet, ended up as CGI. But there are some people that are extreme Star Wars fanatics that place considerable meaning into the Star Wars saga, even though it's not real. So I was looking around on the web for a nice picture of Master Yoda. If you were to look around in my office, you'll also find several Yoda figures. I'm kind of a Yoda-holic. It's one of the few things that I kind of collect very discriminately. I'm very fussy about what Yodas I'll add to my collection. Basically, because I don't have a lot of room for them. So I found this nice picture of Yoda on the web, but I also found this fan site that's referenced here with the URL, where they talk about Yoda's species and give him kind of like the back of a baseball card-like description of his different characteristics. Just so you're on the same page with me, love Yoda, Yoda, not real. What are some of the other problems with words? Words can have a wide range of meanings. We have to be careful when we use words that are extremely general, because the meaning may not be the same for different people. Here's a word that has pretty much no meaning at all. You'll find the little tune in our PowerPoint for class. However, copyright restrictions keep me from putting this into our video. From the movie Mary Poppins, you get the famous word supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And the sound of it, as you know, is quite atrocious. But it was a word totally made up for fun. It has virtually no meaning, although it has been assigned A Meaning for Pleasant Things by somebody someplace. It was a really popular song when Mary Poppins came out. And here is the sleeve for something historical. A 45 RPM recording for use on a record player. I know those might be foreign and strange things to you. Of that tune with Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke. Meaningless words. Well, sometimes we create words that are so general they become meaningless. And sometimes words are so overused that they become meaningless in themselves. I found a list of those words. Let me tell you a couple of them. For example, the word unique used to mean something extremely rare. Now it just means something different. The word awesome. It's awesome, man. It used to be a word describing something to wonder about. Now it's used as a generic word for great or cool. Other words are like this as well. Amazing, totally, basically, incredible, absolutely unbelievable. All of these kind of words used to have specific meanings, but as they get into the popular jargon, they become so general that they lose their specificity. Bacon also talks about double meaning words. And this is a problem because sometimes you have to be careful how words are used because they might have multiple meanings, You have to make sure you're looking at the specific use of the word that's intended. Let me give you some examples of words that can have multiple meanings. For example, the word date can talk about a piece of fruit. It can talk about a social occasion between people. Or it could talk about dating someone in terms of how old they are. We can also talk about your date of birth. We can talk about the word engaged. We can talk about people who got engaged on a certain date to be married. Or, as a professor, I can hope that you're engaged in this presentation. The word foil is another word with multiple meanings. It could be something that you cook with. It could be something you use to change something, like a dramatic foil in a play. Or it could even be a foil that you use for fencing. The word leaves is another one. Children love to play in piles of leaves. They don't like it when their parents leave for work. You can see this. All kinds of multiple word meanings. So we have to learn to be precise with how we use words so that they don't drive us crazy. For example, like boar, the animal, that's a pig-like animal, or the bore of a rifle, or the professor who bores you with a lesson on double meaning words. Now, Bacon also says we may have trouble with personal definition. Have you ever talked to a person and you've used a word and they say, that's not how I use the word. I use this word like that. And usually these people are quite pompous, and to be honest, usually pompous asses, because they're the only ones that ever use that word in that way. So you have to watch out for those personal definitions. Now, as a personality psychologist, let me give you a good example of that. During the 1970s, there was a debate as to what was the proper label for different trait terms. And each theorist who studied a concept wanted to use the same word. But one person's definition of extroversion was different than another's, and still different from a third. And there was a very fruitless and silly, to be honest with you, series of exchanges in the literature at the time, which was before I was a personality psychologist, about what was the concept of extroversion. And it's important to have precise meanings for these scientific terms. But some researchers primarily looked at extroversion as a social thing having to do with gregariousness. Others looked at the biological substrates of extroversion and said it's a biological trait. So the word meant something different to each one of these researchers. Fortunately, we've grown up in my field a little bit, and that's no longer a big debate, but personal definitions, not very. Verbalism, the tendency to attribute significance to insignificant words or phrases. Somebody takes a phrase way out of proportion. I'm not going to give you any examples of that. I want you to think of some examples of verbalism. Maybe you can write them in one of our class essays. Jargon. Every field seems to have jargon, and we accept words that have large meanings and they scare us because, well, they sound extremely technical and nasty. If I were ever to teach a course that requires homework like statistics, which, not my bag, not good at teaching homework courses. But I would teach the course both as the mathematics of statistics and the language of statistics. Because when you throw out a word like multicollinearity, it sounds like a gastric problem someone might have, rather than several variables having the same kind of linear relationship and they co-vary. It's a problem that you face when you do, for example, regression problems and you want unique predictors. If you have several predictors in your equation that are actually the same variable, you're not going to get a very powerful regression prediction formula. So I could throw out all kinds of statistical words and it would freak you out. But if you break them down into root words, they're not that hard. And I really think Bacon was onto something with the second idol, the idols of the marketplace. Oftentimes, to this day, if you listen to the news, you hear people talking about language. And a phrase or term that's important to one person may be insignificant to another and may even be a slur or a defamatory remark to someone else. So basically, if we want to follow Bacon here, we better all get our language in order and use it precisely so we don't make any of these errors. We'll be back with the third of the Bacon idols in our next lecture on the history of psychology. I will hope to see you then, even though you're only going to be looking at my picture and I'm really not going to be seeing you. I'm using some verbalisms here, but got to play with language a little bit when you're doing this one. I'm just too much of a hack to not let that one go. See you next time. This has been a We Have Couches video production. Copyright 2020. Professor Michael Botwin. All rights reserved.